Hello and welcome to the latest in my Helium tutorial videos. In this video we're going to go over remote looping and the ability to use those remote loops not only for remote controlling but also with the new song structure editor where we can piece together these loops into a coherent song and play that back all within Helium. And you can hear the full version of that intro at the end of this video. Thank you to Doug Woods for putting that together for me. So let's begin. Now as you can see here, I've got a small 8-bar loop and we have that split over 3 different tracks. And I actually have one track muted, but basically it's just, if I just play that through for you. Now as you can hear, that's actually 2 4-bar loops added together, and we could split those into 2 different looping sections. If I range the first section, you'll see those 4 bars make up one loop, and the next 4 bars make up another. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to split this 8 bars up into 2 separate loops and define those loop points using the remote looping feature. Now rather than imagine the 8 bars I've got here, I want you to imagine a song you've created with a verse, chorus, intro, outro and so on. And you've just defined those as sections, but you haven't actually got the song structure worked out yet. You can define all these as loops and then trigger them remotely. Now to do that I'm going to use the remote button. So I'm going to tap and hold on the remote button, hit the snapshot and then hit loop 1. And that's stored that loop setting within snapshot 1. And again, tap and hold on the remote button, hit the snapshot, then hit SO2 to store that second snapshot. So what the process has actually done is taken the selection on within the ruler and define that as an area belonging that loop. So we can define up to 12 loops or 12 sections of our song. Now at any point you can always tap and hold on the remote button and then press the SO1 or SO2 buttons to preview the area belonging that snapshot. So now we've defined our snapshots, now we want to look at how to trigger them remotely. Now because we're dealing with loops, we need to enable the loop button. And also because we wanted to use a remote control, I've enabled the remote button. Now we need some kind of input, and I'm going to use the AUM keyboard for this just as an example. Now the way Helium works in remote mode is it waits for incoming note data and it uses that note data to trigger loops in various ways. So the main reason for allowing us to define 12 loops is so that we can assign each of those loops a MIDI key, a key within an octave. So the first loop would be assigned C, the second loop C sharp, the third loop D and so on, all the way up until we've filled an octave. And then the keyboard is then subcategorized into octaves, and each octave does something different. Now as it stands, if I press the play button on Helium's transport, it will start playing the loop. And that's great, but we want AUM to be in control here. If I currently press Helium's button, play button, nothing happens. Helium does not start playing. And the way to make Helium follow the AUM transport is to tap and hold on the remote button and turn on the RTC mode. Now, RTC stands for Remote Transport Control, so this gives AUM the ability to start and stop playback of Helium in remote mode. Now, this is what we want for this example. So Helium is now sat waiting for MIDI note input. Now, with the AUM transport stopped, if I press C3 and C#3, they correspond to the two loops we've set up, and you can see that it switches those loops. Now, if I rewind AUM's transport and press play, the loop plays. And if I press C#3, you'll see that it schedules the second loop. And if I press C3, we'll return back to the initial loop. So the keys from C3 all the way up that octave allow us to trigger a loop, and the loop plays continuously and will only switch loop when a loop is complete. But if we take a look at the octave from C5 up, when I press these, playback will begin and it will play back once and stop. Now again, if we take a look at the octave from C7 upwards, now this is a gated playback and will only play while the key is held. So if I press C7, so with gated mode, playback stops once a key is lifted. And that is really useful. If I keep a key held down, it will loop until I release the note. And just to recap, the octave C5 upwards is just play once. So we've got a continuous loop mode from C3, a play once at C5, and a gated mode at C7. Now, there are modes all over that keyboard, and if you look at the help file, you can see how they work. Now, another important key is B2, which will allow us to stop playback. So if I start playback of C3, and press B2, playback stops, but it doesn't stop straight away, it stops at the next bar. And it's queuing everything in time with the host transport. Another important key is A#2, which removes a loop. We call it unlooping. And I'm going to demonstrate that now. I'm going to start the loop playing, and then I'm going to hit A#2, and the loop's gone. Now, if I cue another loop, you'll see that it will schedule that loop to start at the next beat boundary. And now the loop is back playing again. So that, in a nutshell, is remote looping. But, you know, you might not want to do that. You might not want to trigger remotely. And there is an easier way that doesn't involve us remembering all those keys. And that is song mode. Now, song mode takes a visual approach to this rather than sending meaningless notes through to Helium. And the way we access song mode is by pressing the controller button in the bottom left. And then if you notice, the selected controller button now has a little triangle in the top right corner, meaning you can long press it. And from here we can access song mode. Now, the second you enter song mode, the remote feature is automatically turned on, and looping and RTC. It sets everything up for you. And at this point you cannot turn them off. In song mode, AUM is in control. Now, you'll also notice that the tools in here have changed, and these tools correspond to the different ways we can play clips. You know, there was gated and looped and play once and so on. And the list of controllers has been replaced by a list of loops. So if we select the loop type tool, which is currently set to a loop, we can now draw into this controller area. And what we've done is we've just added a loop which corresponds to loop 1. If you look in the top, SO1 is selected. Now if we select loop 2, we can draw a loop 2. And if we rewind AUM and play back, now those two song clips we added, I actually painted them in as 4 bars long, but it wouldn't have mattered. If I'd have done a 1 bar long, if I return to sequence 1 and rewind and play this, you'll see that once it starts that sequence going, it'll go forever. And we need a way of stopping that. So I'm selecting the stop tool. I'm going to paint in a stop marker up here. And once playback gets to the stop marker, you'll see that play stops. So that really is a basic example of how to schedule loops using song mode. But there's way more than that. So let's rewind that, and I'm just going to double tap on each of these items to remove them from the song chain. So double tapping to remove. And what we're going to do is we're going to change to the gate tool. So if you tap and hold on the tool button, we can select the gate option. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to paint a couple of bars of loop 1, leave a space, and then probably a bar of loop 2, just to demonstrate what the gate does. Now in gate mode, the length of this clip that you lay in is important, because when I press playback, you'll see that the loops start playing and then stop when the clip stops, just like pressing and releasing notes. So let's reset and go through something else. If I change to the loop tool, change back to painting loop 1, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to paint in 3 consecutive blocks of loop 1. So that it schedules 3 blocks. One other thing, if you can drag and drop these around, and you can also resize them by clicking at the tail of the clip. Now if I tap and hold on the first clip, you'll see a little dialog pop up, clip properties dialog, with a bunch of mutes in there, and these mutes correspond to the 16 MIDI tracks. Now what I'm going to do, on clip 1 I'm just going to play back the first track. On clip 2 I'm going to pick the first 2 tracks, and on clip 3 we're going to play back all tracks. Now the benefits of that are obvious. We don't have to define 3 sections of MIDI data with all those tracks enabled and disabled. We can do it on the fly. So hopefully you're getting the idea, and I think this is really going to cut down the complexity of creating a song structure. So before I leave you, there's one other thing. If you have a bunch of clips laid out like this and tap and hold to bring up the clip properties, you actually have a rename option in here, so you can actually name the different parts, the different loops, which is quite nice. Gives you more of a visual idea of what's going on. Now this renames, doesn't rename the clip, it renames the loops. If I go and have a look now at the loops menu, you'll see that the clips have been named, so that it's easy to understand when you're looking at the loops menu. And if I lay another loop 3, you'll see that it has the right name. So that's just about it for this video. I'm going to play out with Doug Wood's composition, which was done with Helium and 16 different versions of Synth Master 1. So we've got 16 tracks going all at the same time. Enjoy.